Hello dear friends, I hope you're having a lovely day. Today I invite you to escape to the wonderful world of Brambly Hedge. Let's read Summer Story together. It was a very hot summer. Each day the sun rose high in the blue sky and the fields shimmered in the heat. The hedgerow was quiet. Many of the mice preferred to stay inside the shady cottages, trying to keep cool. Out of doors, the best place to be was down by the stream. The mice gathered there in the afternoon, sat under the bank in the shade, and dangled their paws and tails in the clear water. On the banks of the stream were the flour and dairy mills. The flow of the water turned the wheels which ground the flour and churned the butter for Brambly Hedge. Poppy Eyebright looked after the dairy stump. She supervised a large vat into which milk, kindly given by some friendly cows, was poured and stored. The many kitchens where cheeses were drained and shaped, smoked and wrapped, were also in her care. Poppy was not fond of hot weather. Her pots of butter began to melt unless they were wrapped in cool dock leaves, and the pots of cream had to be hung in the mill pool to keep them fresh. When her work was finished, she would wander out by the mill wheel, enjoying the splashes of cool water. The flour mill, further down the stream, was run by the miller, Dusty Dogwood. Dogwood was his family name, but he was called Dusty because he was always covered from tail to whiskers with flour dust. He was a cheerful and friendly mouse, like his father, his grandfather, and his great-grandfather, who had all run the mill before him. He loved the fine weather and strolled up and down the stream, chatting to the paddlers and dabblers. His walks took him past the dairy, where he would often see Poppy standing by the stream, looking very pretty. As the long hot days went by, Dusty used to spend more and more time walking up to the dairy, and Poppy used to go out more and more often to the mossy shadows of the mill wheel. Early in June, Miss Poppy Eyebright and Mr. Dusty Dogwood officially announced their engagement. Everyone along the hedgerow was delighted. Midsummer's Day was picked for the wedding, and preparations were started at once. Poppy was so sure the weather would hold that they decided the wedding should take place on the stream. It was the coolest place, and besides, it was very romantic. Dusty found a large flat piece of bark up in the woods, which a party of mice carried down to the water's edge. It was floated with some difficulty just under the mill where, and tethered in midstream by plutter, rush, and nettle ropes. Poppy prepared her trousseau. Every afternoon she sat in the shade of some tall kingcaps, embroidering her wedding dress, which she hid as soon as she saw anyone coming along the path. The wedding day dawned at last. The sky was clear and blue, and it was hotter than ever. The kitchens of Brambly Hedge were full of activity. Cool summer foods were being made. There was cold watercress soup, fresh dandelion salad, honey creams, syllabubs, and meringues. The young mice had been up early to gather huge baskets of wild strawberries. Basil selected some white wines, primrose, meadowsweet, and elderflower, and hung them to cool in the rushes. Basil was in charge of all the cellars under the store stump. He was a stout, good-natured mouse with long white whiskers and a sensitive nose for fine wine. In her rooms above the dairy, Poppy dressed carefully. She polished her whiskers and dabbed rose water behind her ears. Her straw bonnet, which Lady Woodmouse had trimmed with flowers, hung from the bedpost, and her bridal posy lay waiting on the window-sill. She peeped at her reflection in the shiny wardrobe door, took a deep breath, and ran downstairs to join her bridesmaids. Dusty kept his best suit in a basket under the stairs to protect it from the moths. He put it on and tucked a daisy in his buttonhole. "I'd better just check that barley I ground yesterday," he said to himself. He ran up the step at such a pace that the whole mill seemed to shake. The wooden floor above him let down a cloud of dust all over his new wedding suit. "Bother it," he said, sitting on a sack of corn and looking at his mottled jacket in dismay. There was a thumping on the door below, and his friend Conker called through the letterbox. "Dusty, are you ready? It's nearly time to go." Dusty sighed and went morosely down the stairs. As soon as Conker saw him, he began to giggle. "Dusty by name, dusty by nature," he said, trying to remedy matters with his clean handkerchief. The flowery dust swelled and settled again on whiskers, tails, best clothes, and buttonholes. The two mice looked at each other and started to laugh. They laughed so much that they had to sit down on a flour bag to recover. The wedding was to take place at midday, and Dusty and Conker arrived just in time. The guests were all in the finest clothes. 3 young mice, dressed in smart blue suits, had been chosen as pages and were busily directing everyone to their places. Miss Apple discreetly tried to dust down the groom and best man, but to little avail. At last old Miss Eyebright, Poppy's grandmother, spotted the bride and her little bridesmaid coming through the grass. The pages quivered with excitement and got into place. Every head turned to watch the bride as she made her way through the buttercups and stepped onto the decorated raft. The old vole, who has been asked to perform the ceremony, stood up and said in a kindly voice, "Poppy Eyebright, do you love Dusty Dotwood, and will you love him and care for him forever and ever?" Poppy vowed that she would. "Dusty Dotwood, do you love Poppy, and will you love her and look after her forever and ever?" "I will," said Dusty. Miss Apple blew her nose. Then, in the name of the flowers and the fields, the stars in the sky, the streams that flow down to the sea, and the mystery that breathes wonder into all these things, I pronounce you mouse and wife. All the mice cheers as Dusty kissed her bride, and the bridesmaid threw baskets of petals over the happy couple. Miss Apple wiped a tear from her eye, and the dancing and feasting began. First they danced, for no one could keep still, jigs, reels, and quadrilles. Mr. Apple proposed a toast to the bride and groom. May their tails grow long, and their eyes be bright, and all the squeaks be little ones. The guests raised their glasses, and then they danced again. The dancing was so vigorous that the raft bobbed up and down. Gradually, the ropes holding the raft began to wear through. One by one, the little ropes snapped until finally the very last one gave way. They were carried into midstream by the current. The young mice squeaked with alarm at first, but as they seemed to come to no harm, they continued with the feast. The raft floated gently past fields of buttercups and meadowsweet, and the voles tending the fires in the pottery came out to wave as the wedding party drifted by. Eventually, the raft was caught in a leafy clump of rushes and forget-me-nots. The ropes were made fast, and the dancing began again. At last the dusk came, golden and misty over the fields. The blue sky slowly darkened, and the mice began to think about getting home. All the food was finished up, and the pots and pans hidden in the rushes to be collected the next day. They walked back through the fields in the evening sun, looking very splendid in their wedding clothes. The old world was taken back to his hole first, and the rest of the mice gradually made their way home to bed, exhausted but happy. And what happened to Poppy and Dusty? They slipped quietly away to the primrose woods. The primroses were over, but there, hidden amongst the long grass and ferns, wild roses and honeysuckle, was the cottage in which they had chosen to stay. It was the perfect place for a honeymoon.